Okay, so in this video, I want to teach you how you can launch your NFTs on Sui, right? And it's so easy. So as usual, I already created a new project. I'm just going to zoom this in, and the first thing you want to do, of course, is to declare your module, right? So it's module NFT, which is like the name of our package, and then let's call this NFT, right? And so the first thing we want to do, of course, is actually to define a struct that represents the NFT. And so what we want to do in this case is simple. So it's public struct and then the name of the NFT. I think we want to do NFTZ. I'm just trying to like keep everything compact, right? And so we want this NFT to hold a balance, right? And then this balance that this NFT is going to hold could exist or not, right? So we want to give it a phantom type parameter. So and then we can now specify the key and struct abilities for the NFT, right? And of course, anything that has the store ability must have a ID. So that's what you can see here. It was auto added, and then now we can add the NFT name. So that's like a field that the NFT should have. And I have to import string. Just so you know, I'm going to be auto adding imports from now, but I'll just mention it. So it's like if on VS Code, I could easily auto add imports instead of typing the entire thing. And so it's let me add rarity, an unsigned 64-bit integer, and description is also a string. Then the URL is a URL. Now I'm just going to click this so that it imports automatically for me. That's what I mean by auto importing. As you can see, the import is here. And now finally, we want to add the balance, right? We want our NFTs to be able to hold coins and stuff. And so I'm just going to add this. And so I actually have to import balance. So I'm just going to easily use it here. And then you can see that it imported by itself. Now, the next thing we want to do is actually to write the init function. And what this init function does is simple. The init function is going to create the NFT on chain, and then we can now mint the NFT, right? And so let's just get right to it. First, we have to declare our one-time witness, right? The one-time witness is going to serve as what we are going to use for capabilities. You're going to see it very soon. So as you know, public structs, and then the one-time witness is supposed to be the same name as the package you're using. So when public struct NFT has drop, remember that it was supposed to have anything. And then I always wonder why you're not supposed to add this at the end, but oh well. Then so now we can now declare our function, our any function, and then pass in the one-time witness, which is NFT, and then we want to also pass in a mutable reference to transaction context. And so it is CTX mutable reference to transaction context. Then now we can now specify the keys and the values for the NFT display object. I'm not going to copy and paste this from from the C by examples website and then continue from there. So yeah, I actually have to import the UTF-8 function from strings. So you can easily just do that like this and specify that you want to import that, close this off, and everything looks good, right? Now, the next thing we want to do is actually to declare the publisher. So the publisher is the capability for the person that created the NFT, right? And so how we can do this is easy. We just use the Sui package module to do that. So let publisher be equal to package. As you can see, once I click on that, it should import package from me. And then from there, I would easily just use the claim function. I'll specify the one-time witness and the transaction context so you can see. And then now for a second, I actually realized why people use OTW for that one-time witness. It's easier to fill in. And so that's just something that you should know. And now we want to create the display object, right? So it's let me. It could be mutable or not mutable depending on what you're trying to do. I'm not trying to do anything that's really mutable here. So I'm just going to do let display be equal to display and then use the new with fields to specify everything. Now I'm supposed to import this, right? So I'm just going to do the same thing I did before and allow Sui to do that for me. Allow the package to do that for me, by the way, like the extension to do that for me. And so that's the next thing we want to do is actually fill this in. So I'm just going to change this to pub so that it just works automatically. And then fields is keys in this case. So let me just change this to keys. So actually to fields and then provide the transaction context. Now the thing is, our NFT has a balance, and so we are going to have to specify that NFT has a balance, and we can easily do that like this. NFT, right? And then open this up, and then specify the type of like the object we want our NFTs to hold, right? So in this case, let's just say that we wanted it to hold only Sui. We just easily do like this and then close it up like this, and now that just works, right? That said, I'm just going to continue, and then the next thing we want to do is we want to actually specify that this is a reference because we're actually trying to reference here, and then now we can now move on, right? So the next thing we want to do in this case actually to transfer the publisher and display to the person that sends the transaction. So whoever deploys the contracts actually gets those two things. So I'm just going to do transfer and public transfer. And then the object in this case is that pub, which is the publisher. And then once send it to the transaction sender, so it is ctx.sender, right? And then just going to copy this and paste it, close this off, and then specify that what I'm sending in this case is the display object, right? And then I'll send it to sender, of course. Now I'm getting an error here, and I'm just going to hover over this to see. It says the key constraint is not satisfied. The NFT doesn't have the ability key, so it's saying, okay, yeah, that's actually because actually this is actually our NFT, is actually NFTZ. And so another thing that would be an issue here is because I've not specified the Sui. So as we import this like this, so it's use Sui. That's actually the official Sui coin or Sui object. And so now we've written our init function. The next thing we want to do is mint these NFTs, right? And by transferring this publisher and display objects, only the person that has like really defined the NFT will be able to mint new into circulation, right? And so here's what we're going to do. First things first is we're going to just declare the mint function like this. So it's public mint, actually fun. I forgot that. And then mint to sender is what I want to do here. And then of course we want our mint to sender function to take in a generic type parameter. So I'm just going to do this, and then we can now enter everything that we want our NFT to take in. So these are like the things that we want to pass in during what do you call it? Things I want to pass in when we are trying to maintain NFT, right? So let's say I want the things I want to be customized, and then sometimes in this case we want to customize everything, right? We're not getting anything from the init function. The init function does not specify anything, so it's doing means that we will specify all the data. And so what I'm going to do here is of course specify the name that the user should pass in. And then, of course, in this type of case, I actually want to use guys to specify the name as a vector, right? So I just to show you that actually it's all strings and it's just an operation that has to do vectors and strings, right? And so I'm just going to do the description as well, and then it's the same thing. Just going to copy this and paste it, and then we also want to get the URL. So the URL should also be a vector, and then we're going to eventually change it to a URL later. And then finally, a mutable reference to the transaction context always comes last in every case. And so I'm just going to add that, tx context. And then the next thing I want to do is actually to start creating a new NFT object. But before that, just to make things hold up. Actually, let's just go ahead. Let's just go ahead and declare the NFT. So it's going to be let NFT be equal to, and then NFTZ is our NFT, right? So NFTZ, and I'm just allow it to fill everything in for me. And so the ID for our NFT should actually be object new, right? And then specify the transaction context, right? And then the next thing we want to do is specify the name. So the name is whatever comes in here, right? But here's the thing. We have to convert this to a string. So I'm just going to use the UTF-8 function and then specify the name. So this function actually converts the vector to a string, right? And then we're going to do the same thing for description. So it's going to be a description that we passed in, right? And then I think this, yeah. And so just passing it in, and then the rarity. I'm just going to remove that for now. So the next thing is the URL, right? So the URL, I want to just do URL the new unsafe from bytes, and then let's just easily just specify the vector, so it's URL here. Now the rarity, let's just pass it in as 500, just a dummy number, and then for balance, we're going to be passing in balance and use the zero function to prefer that it actually has zero balance, right? And so lest I forget, we're supposed to actually add that this has a generic type parameter here, right? And so now everything works. We haven't imported string, so I'm just going to have to do that. And there is a problem here as well because we already had UTF-8 imported, and I'm just going to do self here so that string can also be imported and can use everything in that namespace, right? So pretty much I'm just going to remove this and remove this. I guess these are like the reasons why you should always import the right things that you want, right? And so I'm just going to add self since we are using some of them. So in this URL case, I'm just going to add self here and then do the same thing for balance, right? So it's self, close that off. Good. Now the next problem I'm having here is the local variable NFT still contains a value. Okay, so that's just the thing that happens because we've not used the resource. And so the next thing we want to just do is transfer this to transaction sender, right? Which is actually the same self because of the way we are doing this thing. But eventually in your implementation, you want to know that you cannot transfer to transaction sender since transaction is actually you, right? So we're just going to do transfer, public transfer, and then this is where you specify. Oh, I misspelled this transfer, and this is where you specify the NFT object, so NFT, and then the sender, so it's ctx.sender, and now you're good, right? So this should actually work, and now this sends, right? But we're going to have a problem here because it says transfer of an object to transaction sender address is usually not something you would usually do in this type of cases, right? So something you can add here to mitigate that warning if something that you want to do is actually use this thing. I don't know what it's called in Move, but in Rust it's called a macro. So allow length, right, and then self underscore transfer, and that should go away if that's something you really care about. And so now we've written the functions for init and mint, and the next thing we want to just do is build, right? Now, you're going to add more functions in an actual NFT, right? So functions to add balances and a lot of other stuff, but it's actually just the basics, right? In your implementation, you're probably going to be doing a whole lot more with your NFTs to really see what Sui affords you with NFTs, which is really, really cool if you ask me. So I'm just going to do Sui Move build and everything works, right? So this is actually about what we just mitigated. That's it. I'm going to show you guys also how to do kiosks. So just watch the next video.